Going now. Now it says I'm in practice session. Is there? Oh, you haven't sent me back to me. Okay, so guys, let's go ahead and kick this off. Hopefully Bruce gets here. He was, like I said, he and I were just on the phone a few minutes ago, so we'll see what goes on here. So, well, hello. I am so excited to have this group together. I think it's going to be a great panel for us today to kind of go over a lot of different topics. And I've got people across the board here for legal advice, with financial advice, with personal emotional advice. So I think we've got a really nice panel here. So let's just start off with introducing everybody. And well, Rebecca, you're big on my screen right now, so I'll go ahead and pick on you. So you're the featured speaker in my screen. So I'll just go ahead and let you kick off. Who are you? What do you do? And all that kind of stuff.
Sure. I'm Rebecca Geyer. I'm an estate planning and elder law attorney in Carmel, Indiana. So I work with families in helping their loved ones do estate planning, or when they have a loved one who may no longer be able to live independently. And we do quite a bit of work with families when a loved one passes away to assist them in what needs to be handled from an administration standpoint. Whether they have a will or a trust or no estate planning at all, we work with families to collect assets and make appropriate distribution to the heirs.
Excellent. Well, thank you. Well, while we're on the topic, we'll have another one. Jeff, why don't we go ahead and have you kind of follow up and tell us who you are and what you do. So,
sure. Good evening. I'm Jeff Stinson. I'm a certified elder law attorney, similar to services of Rebecca. I am an estate planning and elder law attorney in the Carmel area. And I assist folks who are in need of long-term care, help protect assets for long-term care by accessing Medicaid and VA benefits, and as well as work with trust and estate administration when folks pass to help wrap up their affairs in the most efficient way possible.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much. Let's go to Jamie Hopper. We'll stay financial here for a while. So Jamie, tell me, I don't see you on here, but I know you're here. So introduce yourself and who you are and what you do.
Yes, sir. I'm Jamie Hopper, registered financial consultant with Money Concepts. I help people through all phases of life. We work a lot to help families transition their assets from one generation to the next. I do help people with life insurance and long-term care insurance and everything in between. One of the things I've done recently is help start a senior ministry at my church to help families navigate tough situations, a lot of caregiver situations, to make sure they get connected to the resources they need to help them through all phases of that caregiving process also. So we help people through all phases. Thank
you. Bruce, I saw you popped up. So introduce yourself and where everybody else is here kind of central Indiana. So you're not, you're popping in from a distance. So tell me who you are, what you do, and go from there.
Excellent. So my name is Bruce Hill, and I hail from the state of North Carolina. I'm out here in the Raleigh area. Basically, what I do is, aside from being a real estate agent that works specifically with families that might be going through kind of those life transitions, probate specifically, I also have I'm involved in a training organization that takes those insensitive real estate agents that don't know how to handle the loss with empathy. They don't know how to handle life transition with empathy, and we basically train them how to be empathetic and how to truly offer a service other than sticking a sign in the ground if a family needs to downsize or transition out of one home into the other, or even through probate.
Excellent. Sarah, I don't see you, but I think you're there somewhere. So Sarah, could you pop up and tell us who you are and what you do?
I am here. Thanks, Jim.
Okay.
My name is Sarah Kendrick. I have founded a business called Reyes Services, and I help families in a couple of really specific ways. So I am able to help families finalize the estate after a loved one has passed. So doing some of the administrative work of canceling services and making some of those phone calls and doing some of that work for them. And then I also help families with their planning. So making sure that they have all their most essential information available when they need it. Life is unexpected, and sometimes you need information quickly. So I make sure that you have it all together so that someone would know where to find it if you weren't available.
Thank you, Sarah. So that's great. So Angela, would you tell us who you are and what you do?
Yeah, hi, I'm Angela. I'm the founder of New Dawn Comfort Care. And I am a certified end-of-life doula or a death doula. So we go by many terms. And so the main focus of my work is to provide holistic support to individuals, families, and communities who are trying to navigate the end-of-life journey. So that support might be practical, like kind of what we're talking about today, but also considering the emotional and spiritual impacts that death has in our lives, bringing those topics up to the light, as we don't typically talk about death and dying very much in our culture and our society, and supporting people sort of through transformational experiences and transformative experiences in various ways. And I'm also a hospice massage therapist as well. So we're working a lot with hospice in that regard, and doing some teaching and training for community members to learn how to safely touch and stay connected to somebody who is dying.
Well, thank you. So I don't know if everybody even knows that people like you exist. That's one reason I wanted you on here to be able to share with people what goes on there. So Kate, I've lost you on my screen, but I know you're there.
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Kate Horrigan, and I am a family advisor at Indiana Funeral Care. We are a full service funeral home, provide all sorts of funeral care to people, and we work throughout the state of Indiana. I help people plan their funeral in advance, which can take a lot of the emotion out of it, as far as getting those plans set up in advance and make it a lot easier for the family at the time of death.
Very good. Well, guys, like I said, I just wanted to kind of go into this. We're going to touch on the probate side of it today. Probate, I'm assuming at that point, that means that you didn't plan ahead very well. And so now we have those issues to deal with. So, and we've got such a nice array of experts on here that can cover, because, you know, I've been through it far too many times with my own family when someone passes and all of a sudden you're faced with all these decisions of things that you have to deal with, you know, and so we've got a really nice resource here to work from. So I guess we're going to start off, let me kind of lean into the probate side of it. So I'm going to be kind of really directing this towards Rebecca, to Jeff. First of all, when is probate necessary?
You want me to take that, Jeff?
Sure, whoever, yeah.
How much time do we have, Jim?
So probate is the court process of taking a deceased person's name off of an asset and placing it in the name of the people who are to inherit it. And you're going to have a probate situation in one of two matters. Either an individual has a will, and as a result of assets being in their individual name, not titled with anyone else and not passing by beneficiary designation, they have assets worth more than $50,000. In order to activate the authority of the executor or personal representative they named in that will, we have to record it with the court or file it with the court and get the court to issue what's called letters of administration or letters testamentary, so that the named person has the authority to collect assets in the decedent's name and make distribution. And that's what the probate process is. You also have to go through probate if you have a person who died without a will and has assets in their individual name, again, worth more than $50,000, that don't pass by joint title with someone else or by beneficiary designation. And in that case, the probate process is the same, but Indiana statute is going to determine who the heirs or the recipients of the decedent's property are, rather than the will.
And I guess all I can add there, Rebecca did a great job of outlining the probate process, but just to reiterate again, when we're talking about probate, we're talking about the individual has assets that are in their sole name with no beneficiary designation. And those assets in total exceed $50,000. That's when we're talking about usually needing probate. But also there's other situations where you might want probate simply because you need or want the court's oversight of the administration of the estate. It's rare, but there might be creditor issues that you might need probate for. You might just have some disgruntled beneficiaries that it's easier to have that forum versus trying to work it outside the court system. But in general, we're basically going to probate because somebody had more than $50,000 in assets.
So you don't have that issue if you've got like joint tenants in common or all these different kinds of, if you purchase your house and those kind of things, then it automatically transfers, right? Is that correct? Or
yeah, we call those easily enough non-probate assets. And what that means is their joint name, maybe it's an asset in trust, has a beneficiary designation. Those are non-probate assets. You can clear title to those assets without the need for court oversight, court intervention.
okay, well, very good. Well, Bruce, I'm going to bring you on here. So now we've got our house in probate, okay, and they're working with Rebecca or Jeff or somebody to deal with that. So you're, as a realtor, tell me what do you get into? I know that you actually teach this. That's how I met you, was watching you online teaching some stuff on probate. So anyways, could you kind of fill us in on what someone that's got to dispose of a house, they're not inheriting it, they're not, joint tenants in common, they now have a grandma's house is got to be dealt with. So I'll bring you in on that one, Bruce.
So interestingly enough, you just opened Pandora's box because
Okay.
Interestingly enough, in my state, which is not where most of your folks are going to be watching from, in my state, probate actually does not, or real estate does not have to go through probate.
Okay.
Probate is still the process that we're heavily involved as agents that focus and specialize in this type of work. But so it depends on the state. If you guys are watching from Indiana, one of these amazing attorneys will be able to guide you on that and when the house has to go through probate. If you're in North Carolina, guess what? You don't have to go through probate with the real estate. With that said, kind of my genesis, I think, is probably where I should start here. My genesis, the very first time that I even heard about probate was as a real estate agent. And one of my co-agents, one of my peers, came into the office one day and he said, my neighbor's husband passed away this weekend. And I walked over the next day and I handed her a business card and I told her, I guess you're going to be needing me now, aren't you?
Ouch.
And I was absolutely stunned. And I had no idea, number one, that someone could act that selfishly and demonstrate such a lack of empathy. And at the same time, it alerted me to the fact that there was this thing called probate that I didn't know anything about at the time. I was in my early 20s, and that kind of started me on this journey of learning what families needed to go through when they dealt with probate. A lot of people, they're inheriting assets, they're inheriting real estate. Specifically, they don't know when they can sell, and that kind of depends on the state as well. But they don't know when they can sell. They don't know the things that they need to go through when they sell. They don't know if they're allowed to put real estate on the market and dispose of it during probate or after probate or before. There's just a lot of unknowns. And that's why I believe that it's really important, number one, to get yourself a great attorney that does this all the time. But second is to connect with professionals who, and including realtors, who don't just put a sign in the yard, who they're not in it to just make money off of a loss that you've gone through, but they're actually in it to guide you as the family that's going through this process, to guide you through the process with at least a base level of knowledge to coincide with your other professionals that you're working with. A lot of times that agent, at least the ones that I work with, are trained to help you coordinate cleanouts, help you coordinate estate sales, help connect you with the end of life doula if you're not in probate yet, help connect you with the attorneys. So ultimately, that's where I come in, or the agents that I may work with come in as sort of more of a concierge that happen to have a real estate license, and they can help you with that part of it as well.
Very good. I will tell you what, I didn't mention this when we were going through the panel, but one of the companies that we have is a company called Caring Transitions. And in it, we help people downsize this, estate sales, online auctions, what have you. So we're often dealing with, an actual estate sale. And it's just trying to find, and what that's really kind of where Life Copilot came from, is all of a sudden meeting all these wonderful people in these different areas and going, we need to do a better job of educating people to who everybody is out here and what they do. So that's really kind of how we got here today. But some of the things that, we're talking about this, Rebecca and Jeff, both of you, whichever, how do we keep ourselves out of this situation? How do we make sure that our family members are not waiting to the point that we're in probate? What steps do they need to take? Is it just a will? Is it getting it updated? I mean, what do we need to do?
So I guess my answer to that question is probate isn't always as difficult. It gets a bad reputation, but it's not always a bad process to go through. In Indiana, where Jeff and I both practice, probate is actually a pretty easy process these days because everything is filed electronically. You're not really appearing before a judge in order to take action. You file things, and usually in a few days, everything's open and the person can immediately begin collecting assets and making distribution. There are ways to avoid probate if it is a concern for people. One of the biggest misconceptions, and I'm sure Jeff will touch on this too, is that all of your assets pass in accordance with your will or with your trust. That's not actually the case. Some things pass by title, which you mentioned earlier. So if you own a piece of real estate jointly with someone else, that's going to pass by title. If you own a retirement account or a life insurance policy or an annuity, that's going to pass by beneficiary designation. And in Indiana, we have something called the Transfer on Death Act, where you can designate a beneficiary in almost any asset and it will avoid probate. That said, it really depends on your situation as to whether or not it's a good idea or not to avoid probate. For example, I had a case not too long ago where someone had left beneficiaries on all of their accounts, and the beneficiaries were the children. And that sounded great that they were avoiding probate, but the children hate each other and do not get along and wouldn't work together to sell property. And if that had just gone through probate and one person had been appointed, we would have been much better off. So I think it depends on the family's objectives, what their assets actually are, and then we work to determine what the best approach is from an estate administration standpoint when we're trying to plan for that family.
Excellent. I didn't know if you want anything go further or not. Okay. So one of the things that as we're doing this, we've just lost someone if we're in probate, or maybe they're very ill and they can't make decisions or what have you. That could very well be, we know we're heading that direction. And that's one reason I've got, some others on here. Angela, why don't you tell us what you really do and what it is? Because I don't think a lot of people really understand, your field. Okay. So that it exists.
Yeah, thank you. So my primary role with people in the community is to support them through the time of terminal diagnosis all the way to death and even beyond. So that's why I'm actually learning a lot from this panel. Probate is not an area of expertise for me, but it is one of those things that inevitably, will come up when there's a loss and somebody is trying to deal with what to do with the belongings of maybe a parent who's died. I've gone through it personally with my mom when I was 19. She had died, and there were things that needed to be given away and things, and so I use a lot of my own personal experience to draw from as to why I do the work that I do. I feel that just death and dying in general is something that we're not very well prepared for. The how to do it. How do we die well? Many of us are very focused on staying well, of course, and that's very important, but death is an inevitable part of life that we're all going to have to face. And I think that we, in our community, we need so much more knowledge about how to navigate this part of our life that we're inevitably going to face. It's an area that I call death literacy. And so that's one of my main focuses of my work, is providing death literacy to the community. And that shows up in many different ways, whether that's learning about the death system. And so that might be learning about palliative care or hospice care, how to have conversations with your physicians, what questions to ask so that you're getting the care that you need. I always say that if you don't know what questions to ask, you're not going to get the knowledge and the information that you need. And so I work very much in a team setting with, elder law attorneys and, people who I'm so glad to see you, Sarah. We've met before in this work. And so I have people to refer to when I know that there's something that's sort of out of my scope, but my scope is primarily at the bedside and working with clients as they're going through their transition to try to help and support them through that. There's a lot of emotions that come up during that time that are really difficult to process. So there's sort of just different ways that we can do that together as a part of that person's team. And so and just all through, the dying phase, all the way until that person takes their last breath. There's also things that we can do to perform like different rituals and ceremonies and things to honor that person even before the funeral happens. So a lot of people don't realize that you have the right to do that. You have, to keep your person's body at home, for example, and do something at the bedside before even the funeral home comes. So my whole role is to really help people to slow the whole process down quite a deal. I think it's something that we just kind of want it to be over with. And a lot of the things we're talking about today can be really stressful. The whole death and dying and grieving experience is a very difficult part of our human experience. But we can also, when we're supported, there's a lot of ways to find healing through the journey. And so that's where my work sort of comes in, is to help people to find meaning making through this process. So we have to do all the practical things like we're talking about here, having the attorneys and putting the house up for sale. And one of the ways that I can support sort of along these lines is more with like the personal objects that maybe you're trying to distribute to your friends and your family, your kids, your grandkids, and helping people to kind of think through that process and where to even begin with that. So there's some really interesting and creative ways that we can do that.
Very good. Kate, I was going to say, bring you on here. If someone goes through this, they've just lost a family member, obviously that's how we got to probate or whatever here. So if that's the case, that's somebody that's going to be probably knocking on your door, or somebody in that field, if they haven't already prepared ahead of time. And today we're kind of planning on people not being prepared. So Kate, when they come to your door at this time, I've been in that room too many times, and it is such an emotional time trying to make all these decisions and trying to figure out all the things I have to do, and that's the one that has to be done. So could you kind of bring us up to what you can do to help someone through that process? And then you can, if you want, you can also talk about how they can prepare ahead of time to avoid it too, I suppose. So
Sure. So when a death occurs, we, if we've talked to the family in advance, even if it's, 24, 48 hours in advance, and they know, we reassure them that when the time comes, they should take the time that they want and give us a call when it's, when either other family members have come to see their loved one, or if they, just want to have that moment before, things start rolling as far as the funeral preparations. But after we've picked up the individual, we will, they'll sit down with one of our licensed funeral directors and go through, all of the steps as far as planning the services and making sure that, the life of that individual is, truly captured and celebrated, according to either their wishes or the family's wishes. We try to personalize each service as much as we possibly can, whether it's through videos or music or, any kind of tributes that the family wants to deliver. And then we hope that will, I guess, help move them through the steps of the grieving process. It is, it is not something that happens fast. There are, weeks and weeks and months of grief. And so, you want to make sure that the individuals who are still alive take time to process that and move to the next step when they're emotionally ready. So just guiding them along those steps is part of our work. Once the services are over, we have several people on staff, myself included, that are family advisors. And so we follow up with our families and make sure that their needs are met in terms of one, grief support, but also, did they get enough death certificates? Do they need us to get more for them? Have things come in as far as veterans benefits that, we help them file. Just details that, especially for someone who's going through a death for the first time, they don't really know everything that they're supposed to, be thinking about. And so we try to be there to kind of along the lines of what Angela said, help them ask the questions that they need to ask. And so, it's a privilege to be able to help people during this time. It's very emotional, and we take it very seriously. So we want to make sure that they feel comfortable every step of the way. As far as pre-planning, when people pre-plan, they kind of take some of the nuts and bolts out of the decision-making part of, of the funeral service. So whether it's details that we need for the death certificate, which there are lots of somewhat obscure details, just, highest level of education, where the deceased was born, what city they were born, to, mother's maiden names and things like that. As well as, did, the mom or dad, did they want to be cremated or buried? Some people don't have those conversations, and it's really important for them to, even if they don't actually sit down and pre-plan, to at least let their family know these are their wishes, and make sure that they all know the same thing, because a lot of times we'll have someone who says, well, mom told me, 6 months ago she wanted to be cremated, and then mom changed her mind and told another child that she wanted to be buried. And so it's helpful if you can get some of these details worked out in advance, because it just makes it easier on the survivors to go through those emotional steps, and not have to worry about any disagreements or any challenges along those lines.
Well, from my own experience, you're highly raw emotionally. You're many times exhausted because you may have not slept much. So there's all kinds of other things that you're trying to make all these critical and important decisions. So let's get money on here. Jamie, tell me what do you have to do, and how do people prepare themselves to make sure their finances are in order?
Absolutely. As a financial planner, I tend to want people to plan ahead of time. And as Rebecca and Jeff both said, probate does not have to be a bad thing. It can be a natural part of the process, unfortunately, much like dying. And what I would do, and they've already mentioned this, is first of all, make sure you've got your beneficiaries correct. Make sure that if you've gone through a divorce or somebody's passed away, that you've got the right beneficiaries on your life insurance, on your retirement accounts, that's huge. I really feel like one of the most important things you can do as a family is have a discussion with everyone involved and let them know, this is how I want things to go when I'm not here. This is what I want you to do for your mother. This is what I want you to do when we're both gone. And then make sure everybody's okay with the situation. Make sure there's no fighting. In this world today, we have a lot of blended families, and that causes a lot of the issues that Jeff and Rebecca have to deal with the infighting that goes on in those situations. And if you have those discussions ahead of time and make sure everybody's on the same page, there can be a lot of things you can do with that. There are a lot of things we can do with life insurance to make sure everybody gets taken care of properly, especially if there's a business involved and what maybe one child is going to take over that business. We can use life insurance to make sure the other child is well compensated in those situations, and it's kind of an equitable situation for everyone. Those are important. The other things as a financial planner we need to talk about are the changes that are going on in Washington right now with the estate tax and the exemption and all of the capital gains taxes and all of those things to make sure things are done properly. And I would work with the family, especially if somebody has done well for themselves and they really want, the Bible says we should leave a inheritance for our children's children. If that's really your goal to do that, it's important that not only do we plan your estate transfer, but also talk to your children about what's going to happen when it's time for them to transfer, and look at the taxes that are going to be paid. And there are a lot of things that we can do to help people pay taxes in their lifetimes when their tax rate might be lower than what their children in their 40s, 50s, and 60s in their high income years are going to pay in taxes when they have to take it out. One of the big changes we've seen lately is the stretch IRA rule. It used to be if you had inherited an IRA from anyone except for your spouse, you were able to stretch that out over your lifetime. And now it's 10 years, you have to take all of that money out. And that's really changed the way people adapt to that situation when it happens. And people are really stuck. Maybe they don't need the money right now. Maybe they do want to save it for their future, but you have to pay that tax within the first 10 years. There are a lot of things we can do to help people pay for long-term care insurance with that money and have it pay out over 10 years to do that. Just getting things done properly and planning ahead are huge. One of the things we're doing now before they make some big changes in Washington are helping families do Roth conversions with their IRAs and make sure that's done now. We can do it slowly because if our government has anything to do with it, they're going to make people do those conversions in big chunks, and they're going to have huge tax consequences in the future. And if we plan those things ahead of time and work through the situation, there are a lot of things that we can do to make sure that that transition happens a lot more tax efficiently than if you just let it happen. So there's a lot involved. Every case is different, but I really think the key is to get all of your advisors involved, get your attorneys, get your accountant, get your financial advisor, get your children all in the same room, and let's work this out together and say, this is what needs to happen when I'm not here, and this is how we're going to get this done, and then continue to have those conversations all the way up until the end to make sure things go exactly the way you want them to. So that's what I would add into this conversation. Just make sure everything's up to date, make sure everybody's involved, and make sure that transition goes exactly the way you need it to.
Excellent. Sarah, you have got a very unique business model, and it's one that I think is highly, oh my God, it would be life-changing for people as they're trying to deal with this. So do you get involved with people before they pass and get things set up, or are you normally being brought in afterwards to help clean up, all the stuff that the family needs?
Well, the short answer is yes.
Okay.
So I can actually help on either side. So basically everything that everyone has commented on tonight, I help them take all of that information and I put it in one place. So it's a document that I've created. I've created a book that helps people to make their wishes known, to help pass along that information so that it's available not only if someone passes away, but if there's an emergency or if there's a hospitalization or you can't speak, or just any sort of situation where the information that you have needs to be shared with somebody else. I make sure that that's available. So where is the will? Who are those beneficiaries? What are those accounts? What are your passwords and information? And so I walk people through filling out that book. I do that with them so that we actually get it done. Because I think people mean really well in kind of, oh, well, we should do that, but it kind of gets pushed to the back because we don't want to talk about it, or it takes a lot of time. So I walk through them with that process and make sure it gets done. And then it's available for whenever they need it. It's updatable whenever things change, because as long as we are here, things are going to continue to change. And so that's one way that I can help families ahead of time, is just making sure that information is available when they need it. And then after someone has passed away, so the rules are a little bit different. So at that point in time, that's when I can provide some of that administrative support. So, after you've lost a loved one, I believe that you shouldn't have to call the cable company if you don't want to. And, just a lot of those details that have to be managed after someone passes are just, it's very overwhelming for some families. And it's hard to grieve when you have to call the cable company and have to call the insurance company and have to get in touch with a lawyer or a realtor. And if you don't have that information available ahead of time, I know some of those people, especially here locally. So some of the work I can do for people wherever they are. And then some of it, I have resources here locally. And so I can connect them with someone who can help them do some of the work that I can't do. But I can help them notify different government agencies that someone has passed away, again, so that they don't have to do that work. They can spend time with their families or grieve, or they don't have to put on that hat of, okay, now I'm going to wait on hold and talk to the insurance company. I'm going to talk to the cable company. And I just kind of am able to step in and provide some supports in that way.
Very good. So I can definitely see that as a huge asset as far as for someone that's trying to figure out how to do all this stuff. Bruce, I was going to kick back to you a little bit. When I know that you do a lot of work with probate homes. Now, granted, or homes for families that are in probate, the home may not be, as you said, but how do people find you? How do you, you don't go, you're not doing the Robin Williams coming up at the funeral and giving a card for a new car to the hearse when it's broken down. So, Cadillac man, it's a funny show. It reminded me of what you said that guy said when he walked across the street. So, how do you find your people, or how do they find you? And then what do you do to guide them through this process with that emotionally raw family? Did I lose you, Bruce?
My speaker was off.
Oh, okay.
Yep. Forgive me. I've had myself on mute. I figured you didn't want to hear my dog.
Yeah, well, I've been doing mine that way too. So
the typical family normally would find someone like myself from typically my connections with folks like you have here on the panel. So what Sarah does, absolutely crucial while you're going through probate. I offer a lot of those same types of services to folks that are going through probate. And the dirty little secret is I do that by having someone like Sarah. So Sarah and I would work really closely together. You have Jamie. Typically, I'm working closely with multiple financial advisors and multiple different attorneys to kind of ultimately find out what the typical family is going to be going through, and trying to find unique solutions that can provide something that they need, even if they don't know that they need it. I'm relatively vocal with the people that I know about what I do. There's kind of the worst time to go pitching this type of service is when someone is in the middle of the grieving process. Even though we do have those conversations and introduce ourselves to people that are going in the middle of it and going through it, it's kind of the worst time. It's a time when oftentimes you can be viewed as potentially an ambulance chaser. It's one of my biggest fears in life is being viewed that way. Okay. But everybody's going to go through this. And by and large, people that are going through the probate process or inheriting property, many times they're not planning to move in, they're not planning to keep that real estate. And it is an asset that needs to be sold. There's 2 million realtors in the United States. So rather than say, I'll come put a sign in the ground, give me your money and I'll sell your house, we show up and we say, we can meet the locksmith for you. We can arrange lawn care. We can arrange property cleanouts. So for me, I work with the people that you guys are seeing on this panel all day long, because that's what someone that's going through probate needs. They don't need a single service solution. They need a team. And that's kind of how I've built my probate side of my business, is by offering that team and offering those connections that people would otherwise have to go hunt for individually. And I think that that's what each one of us are doing as well.
Yeah, it definitely takes a team, and that's one of the keys here. And as you know, most realtors don't have that team. They have the mortgage guys, the title guys, whatever, but they don't really know how to handle like I'm a big believer in the SRES degree. I like it really well too, because it kind of focuses on how to find these resources, I think, more than anything else. So yeah, I appreciate that. So let me ask, I'm going to go back to my attorneys here. So what do we need to do? Like you said, probate's not a really big thing. It's not a really bad thing, especially in Indiana. But what do we need to do to make sure that we've got everything covered? Is it just a will, or is there something else we need to do, or do we need to I'm looking for some free advice here.
Well, if you think of how you own all of your assets, I bet I could wager that you have very few assets that will qualify as probate assets.
Okay.
You have a retirement account or retirement plan. It has a beneficiary on it. That's not a probate asset. You might have a home that's in joint name with your spouse. You have bank accounts that are in joint name with your spouse. So in particular, when you have a married couple, there's probably very few probate assets when the first person passes away. But even if you're single, if you start looking and adding up things, most of my clients have 3 major assets. They have some money in the bank, they have a retirement account, and then they have a house. That's it. That's what they have. And so there might be very few, the retirement account's not a probate asset. Rebecca mentioned a TOD deed, transfer on death deed. So another way that we can avoid the house going through probate. And then we get to the bank accounts and we're less than 50,000. So I know that was just a kind of a roundabout way of mentioning things, but very few people have a lot of probate assets these days because of the nature of retirement accounts and beneficiary designations and the like.
Yeah, I agree with everything Jeff said. I would just say one of the misconceptions and one of the ways you can probably best help your family as you're preparing for end of life experiences, or even for an incapacity, touches on some of the things that Jamie mentioned earlier. And that is really arming your family with important information so they can act for you when something happens. And this is a lot of what I know Sarah does as well. And most of the time what happens is people get into a crisis situation due to an incapacity or death, and the information they need in order to act is not readily available even to the people that they've named as their power of attorney or as their executor. So if you can take a few minutes on an annual basis and do things like make copies of your health insurance cards for your healthcare representatives, make a list of your important advisors, make a list of your assets with the account numbers. You don't have to list the actual value of those assets, but at least where they're held and who might be contacted in the case of an emergency or in the event of your death. A list of your doctors, important passwords. Passwords are a huge issue that comes up in the event of an incapacity or a death. So none of these things even require an attorney, but taking some proactive steps to really just collect this information and have it available to your loved ones in case of an incapacity or a death. I would also add to that a list of your medications and the physicians that you see, because so often we don't really think of ourselves as needing to provide that information to our loved ones because we're healthy and making those decisions ourselves. But you just never know when an incapacity could occur, and your loved ones need to be armed with information to help you. And they need copies of the documents that people like Jeff and I prepare for our clients you need to make sure the people that you've named to make decisions financially or from a healthcare perspective have the documents so they can truly act for you.
Yeah, it's very much to have one thing to have the authority to act. It's another to have the instruction and information to act on that authority. Both of those things are necessary.
Excellent. That's great advice. So anybody else have something they want to put into this? I mean, did I miss something? You know, because this is our training to make sure we get that thing out to people that we would want to tell them. So anybody else got something you want to bring to this?
Yeah, I would just say write things down. I'm obviously a big proponent of that, as that's partly what I help people do, but it doesn't have to be quite that official if you don't want it to be, but there is something really powerful in having things written down. People's memories may fade, they may forget what they said, they may tell one person something and somebody else something else. But if you write it down, it just carries a little bit more weight and can kind of help maybe eliminate some of that conflict and some of that struggle of not knowing exactly who had been told the right thing. So I would just say, write it down, make your plans as clear as possible.
Very good. Well, guys, if you don't have, I was going to say this was a phenomenal one. I've really been very excited about this. I think it's got great information. We've had a good attendance for this as all the way through. Haven't had any questions. Anybody that's watching have questions, you can type them out for me here and I'll be glad to answer them for you. But guys, thank you very much for coming. Well, obviously you'll get a copy of this video to promote however you want to, and we'll go from there. But I think this was great. I want to thank each and every one of you for your evening as we're doing this. And then I am going to take advantage of sneaking out just a couple minutes early to run up to my mom's before they lock the doors to see her for her 84th birthday. So I will see you guys later. Thank you very much for being here. See you.
Thanks, Jim.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jim.
Thank you.
Wait a minute, hang on a second. Oh, great stuff. Okay. See you guys. Bye-bye.
Bye.